time I was in a class with all classical musicians, we all had to play a piece because we all been taken from the same teacher. And I started telling the girl about that piece, what the changes were.
Okay, so, before we start, I put effects on the songs featured so I don't get copyright claimed. So don't complain that they sound weird, okay cool.
What you just heard is probably too weird for your or even your friends' music tastes, but it's a great representation of just how far music has come in the last 100 years. How can a song combining breakbeat and phonk be so strange? However, in order to figure out why the track you just heard can even begin to exist in the first place, we need to go way back. No, not that far back. That's much better. This is classical music, and while it doesn't sound anything like what you've just listened to, it's gonna get there. Around the turn from the 19th to 20th century, classical music started to simplify, creating marching band music. Soon afterward, African Americans picked up the genre and swung it, making the earliest form of jazz. Jazz evolved into blues, which evolved into rock. Rock is where we have our first major split in musical history. Around the 70s, rock went down two paths: the analog route of metal and the digital route of disco. However, we won't be talking about metal today because disco is arguably the most important genre to exist within the last 50 years. Because it died. Except it didn't, but we'll get to that. Disco had a pretty good 10-year run. It was good for what it was, but around the end of its lifespan, people started to develop a kind of distaste for it. One such person, Steve Dahl, decided it would be hilarious to host a special disco demolition themed baseball night. Right before said baseball game, thousands upon thousands of disco records would be blown to pieces using real explosives. The disco records did indeed blow up, but in doing so, the organizers incited a huge riot in what can only be described as the day disco died, 1979, July 12th. Discontent with its death, disco came back, as two genres. It combined with the TR Roland 909 drum machine to create house, and the TR Roland 808 to create hip-hop. Don't worry, we'll come back to house in a minute, but right now let's focus on hip-hop. The earliest hip-hop songs are what I like to call disco hip-hop. And why? Well, simply put, they sample disco tracks. This didn't last long though, as hip-hop quickly dropped the lighthearted nature of disco in favor of a more down-to-earth, serious tone and began to heavily rely on percussion. This is old school hip-hop. And around the 90s, a very specific genre of old school hip-hop started to crop up called Memphis rap. And wouldn't you guess it, Memphis rap comes from Memphis. Anyway, old school hip-hop evolved into mid-school, which around 2014 evolved into modern hip-hop. In any case, we need to talk about a very specific hip-hop album released in 2012. This album was called Mysterious Phonk, and it's where the musical mashup of things we know as funk made its beginnings. As funk started to progress as a genre, it picked up everything we know about modern hip-hop while simultaneously getting much older. The samples, techniques, and sounds producers of the genre were using started to get older and older until it finally settled in the 90s with Memphis rap. And truth be told, funk is the natural progression of Memphis rap, who would have thought? However, funk is only half of our equation. The other half is breakbeat, so where the hell does that come from? Well, let's go back to house. The very first rendition of house was, you guessed it, disco house. Then disco house went to Chicago, where it became, you guessed it, Chicago house. Despite the fact that Chicago house started in Chicago, it was really popular over in the UK. Because Chicago house started to make waves across the pond, it wasn't long before UK DJs started to put their own spin on it, inadvertently creating UK garage. UK garage has its own massive twisted history, but we'll be focusing on one specific branch. Eventually, UK garage producers got their hands on old R&B records. After some experimenting, they found that by speeding up the drum breaks, they could combine it with garage to make some funky beats. Thus, jungle was born. Jungle then made its natural progression to breakbeat, which further differentiates itself from traditional garage. Now we have both sides of the story. Both sides, which I combined into one hell of a track. However, genre blending hasn't always been such a popular thing to do. For the longest time, it was barely even possible. But due to the simple fact that half of all popular music comes from the same place, and the same ideas, now more than ever, we are living in a musical renaissance. Even more so due to the sample-heavy nature of both house and hip-hop. Everything from brostep to hybrid trap to horrorcore has a deep-rooted relationship with samples. This, as one might imagine, promotes incredible collaboration between any and all musicians. Find something you like, take it, and make it your own. Everyone is currently making everything possible. You just have to do it with them. Well, this was certainly a video, and it's definitely not something I would usually make. But if you liked it, please like and subscribe, and maybe leave a like. If you did not, leave a dislike, unsubscribe, and put a hate comment in the comments. Do whatever, I don't know. I don't give a shit. Do what you want, man.